Our oldest daughter, Ashton, came out of the womb loving books. And I'm serious. She would sit in my lap and listen while I read aloud to her for long periods of time, even as a very small baby. Our second daughter, Parker, not so much. She had little interest in books, and especially in sitting still. And she was not a quiet baby or child as she grew bigger. Reading has always been really important to me. Books have been a huge part of my life. My whole family culture was all about books. And I also knew what a big impact reading and a love of reading for kids and reading aloud to kids can have on the rest of their lives. So I worked really hard when Parker was a small baby and child to make sure she got a lot of exposure to books. And I worked really hard to find ways to read aloud to her where she would enjoy it. I would do things like we would start off reading together and I would let Parker get down and play and crawl around while I continued reading to Ashton. We would read before nap time, and of course as a very small baby that didn't really work as well, but as she got older it worked really well because she knew that as we were reading that meant she wasn't in her crib yet, and so I could get longer stretches of reading there. I would also put her in her high chair and give her like finger food and then let her eat because she loved food, and I would read to her while she was in her high chair, distracted by food. And I would also let her, when we were reading together, I'd often let her be in charge of the book, even if it meant skipping parts or flipping really fast or different things like that, and made sure that she had a lot of books that she could play with independently, because she really, from a very small age, and she still loves this, to flip through books on her own, or let her have a book that she could flip through while I was reading to the rest of to Ashton, and as she got older to Riley as well. Now she is 5 years old. She has a personal goal to learn her letters. It's not something that I have given her. She decided that that's something she wanted to do because she does want to learn to read on her own, and she knows that's the first step, is learning her letters. Several times a day you can find her sitting on the couch or the floor, just flipping through books and looking at the pictures and the letters on the page. She often brings books to me and asks me to read them. She loves picking out books at the library and having me read them to her. When I do read aloud to the kids, she sits for very long periods of time, half an hour to an hour, and sits quietly and listens to the book that I am reading to them, even chapter books. I can tell from the way that she interacts with books that she has truly grown to love reading and books, and as a mom who loves reading, as a bookworm mom, that makes me really happy. Today I wanted to share a little bit about one of my favorite parenting books, the Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease, and just share some of the principles from it that help children to fall in love with reading and things that you can do as a parent to encourage that. This is a book that I think every parent should read, this or one similar to it. It is accessible. It cites a lot of research and statistics. It has a lot of stories and examples to keep your interest, and it outlines applicable things that parents can do today to start encouraging a love of reading in their children. For me, I always find it really motivational to reread this, especially if I find that I am not reading aloud to my kids as often, or we're doing things like not going to the library as often or something. It always remotivates me to make sure to keep books and reading a big part of our family culture. So some of the things that the book highlights that are so important. How much a child reads on their own is directly linked with their future success in school and in life as an adult. And the most important thing that you can do as a parent to encourage your child to read on their own is to read aloud to them from the time that they are born to clear through their teenage years. Most parents will read to their children when they're young and before they can read, but as children learn to read on their own, a lot of parents will stop reading aloud to their children, but they are missing out on a lot of benefits from doing that. One of the things that I think is so cool is that the benefits of reading aloud to your children are true across all socioeconomic families, race, religion, parental status, economic status. I don't know how to say all of these things, but just no matter your station in life, I guess, or your situation at the time, whether you're single or married or anything like that, reading aloud to your kids will translate into a lot of these benefits still. I just wanted to quickly share an example from my own life because my mom, I grew up with a single mom. My dad made a lot of poor choices when I was very young, and he wasn't in the picture from the time I was about 3. My mom became a teacher and to support us so that she would be able to be home a lot of the same hours that we were. Obviously, it was hard because being a single parent is hard. But she loved reading and books, and she prioritized a lot of the things that this book actually talks about. And I think it's super cool because looking now, my 2 brothers and I are all avid readers. And my younger brother is an especially cool example of this because he grew up with a learning disability. He was in resource and those types of classes all throughout school. He had a really hard time learning how to read and write. Even just holding a pencil for him was really hard. But my mom read to him. I remember when I was in high school, so he would have been in probably middle school, and I remember my mom sitting on the couch reading to him still at that age. And he loved books. He loved comic books, and he loved the Hardy Boys and Harry Potter and things like that. But he had a really hard time learning to read on his own. We would sit for family scripture study, and we would each take turns reading, and we all dreaded when it was John's turn because one verse would take him 10 minutes, and so it was just like, oh, this is so boring as a teenager, But he was able to learn to read because of one teacher that he had in middle school. Up to this point, his teachers would all assign him certain books that they felt were on his reading level, and he was never interested in them, and he hated them. Even books like The Magic Tree House or just easy reader books, he absolutely hated them, especially as he got older. He just wasn't interested in them, but those were the books that they were giving him to learn to read with. And in 7th grade, he had an English teacher, and she was amazing, and she said, pick a book, any book, and read it this year. And so he picked, I think, Harry Potter 4. It took him the whole year, but he read it and finished it, and because of that, his reading level, of course, went up, because when you spend a lot of time reading, your vocabulary and your context and your reading level just shoot up. And now he reads books like Brandon Sanderson, Charles Dickens, and he reads a lot of classics, a lot of self-help books. He reads a lot, listens to books, and he sits down and reads books, and he loves reading. And I think that's such a cool story because he had a lot of things stacked against him where he could have easily ended up not thinking that reading was something that was enjoyable to do and just not reading during his life. But I also have seen a lot of the benefits that he's gotten from reading. It has really enriched his life and made him a better person to be reading as an adult. So some reasons to read aloud. This is straight from the book on page 6. It builds the child's vocabulary. It conditions the child's brain to associate reading with pleasure, because as we are sitting with them, they're hearing our voice, they're cuddling with us, especially even as a baby. They are associating that action with something that is positive. It creates background knowledge, which background knowledge is simply like context. So, if you are going to a baseball game and you had never heard of innings and outs and even like what a baseball bat was, if someone told you a story about that baseball game, you'd be really confused. But if you know the kind of the lingo, then they can tell you the story, and it is a lot more easily processed in your brain. And that's what happens with kids as we read aloud to them. We are giving them background knowledge so that when they go to read on their own or learn things on their own, they have the vocabulary and the understanding of what those things are in context, so that it's a lot more easier for their brain to process what they are actually reading. It provides a reading role model so they can see you actually reading to them, and it plants a desire in them to read themselves as we teach them to love stories and make them fall in love with the stories themselves. Then they will have a desire to be able to go and read on their own. Recently, my 6-year-old got a book from the library because the book she wanted wasn't in yet. And once the book that she wanted came in, she decided she wasn't going to read the first one. My husband didn't know any of this, but he was trying to pick something to read to them that night, and he picked up the first book that she had taken home. It was a little chapter book, and read the first chapter to them. And then she decided that she liked it enough that she was going to finish the book, and she is now on book 5 of that series. So it really can plant that desire within them to read on their own if you read aloud to them. Reading aloud is one of the best ways to grow your child's vocabulary, which not only makes it easier for them to read, because then when they go to read, they will recognize those words and not have to like learn new words while they're also learning to sound out the words and things like that. It gives them a boost up in school, and the size of your vocabulary is a high predictor of your success later in life. So the book has this really cool chart about words. So one of the things it talks about is the common lexicon versus rare words. Most conversation consists of 5,000 words that we use just all the time. An adult to a child that is about 6 months old, they will generally use 9.3 rare words per 1,000 words that they speak. So talking to your children is good, especially young babies, because babies don't know any words yet. And so of course they need to learn the most common 5,000 words, right? But once they start getting older, then you want to expand their vocabulary, and talking to them no longer does it quite as efficiently. So an adult to a child about 10 years of age usually uses 11.7 words per average every 1,000 words that they speak. An adult to an adult uses 7.3. TV uses 22.7. Children's books use 30.9. An adult book uses 52.7. Comic books use 53.5. Popular magazines use 65.7. A newspaper uses 68.3, and a scientific paper uses 128. So you can see that there are certain things that are better for growing vocabulary than other things. So talking to your children is always a good thing, but reading to them will give them more rare words and will build their vocabulary a lot quicker. Another thing I found interesting, because like I said earlier, a lot of people stop reading to their kids once their kids can read themselves, or get to a point where they're reading books that it feels like, well, they could read this book, why would I read it aloud to them? One of the interesting things is that our listening comprehension is actually higher than our reading comprehension. And so reading aloud to your kids, you can actually read books that they wouldn't be able to read on their own to them. And this is true clear through the 8th grade. And so even when they're teenagers, it can give them an advantage when it comes to vocabulary, besides like the obvious, building a family culture and having that time together and all of the other benefits that come from reading aloud to your child. So how exactly does a person or a child get proficient at reading? The more you read, the better you get at it. And the better you get at it, the more you like it, and the more you like it, the more you do it. Because we are essentially pleasure-based beings, where we like to do things that bring us pleasure versus pain, right? That's how we build habits. The more you read to your child, the more they're going to like it when they are reading on their own. The more that they will do it on their own, the better they will get at it, the more they'll do it, and it's a cycle. It's also important to understand what motivates kids to read. One of those is that they enjoy the experience, the pleasure part of it. They like the subject matter, or they're interested in the subject matter of the book, and they like or look up to people who read a lot. So one thing that is important here is that when kids are learning to read on their own, that you let them pick what books they want to read, even if it's something like a comic book or a magazine, or something that feels really like a fluff read, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or like I read fluff reads. But there are parents who worry because their kids aren't reading classics, they're reading comic books and fluff reads, and they're worried that will have a negative impact on your kids. I am very religious, and so I do believe that we, as parents, we can help our children find books that are morally acceptable. Obviously, I think that it's important as a parent to make sure that you're helping your children find books that are in line with your morals, but there are a lot of books that are a little bit more fluff that are actually really helpful for kids. Reading a whole bunch of books in one series, like a chapter book series, can actually really increase a child's vocabulary very quickly, because they have the context as they move from book to book. They don't have to relearn names, locations. They understand what's going on. They're immersed in that world with those characters, and so it's easy for their brain to read through those very quickly. But then each book is introducing them to new words and new vocabulary, and building their reading level. I know with our 6-year-old, she was reading on about a level 2 beginner reader level, and she would read just like 1 or 2 pages a day to me. around, November. And then we took December off for Christmas. For Christmas, my mom gave her the Magic Tree House series, the first 4 books. And I was planning on reading them aloud to our kids, but Ashton actually started reading the first one on her own. And I was surprised by how much she was actually able to read and get out of it, even though there were quite a few bigger words that she read wrong or skipped over or whatever. But I just let her read them, and she actually bought a nightstand and a lamp and started reading before bed. She is now on, I think, 21. She wants to read all of them, but there's like 57. I'm like, if she wants to, that's fine with me. Just for the first few Magic Tree House books, her reading level just skyrocketed. And in January, when I started getting the easy reader books again, I was like, well, I'll get level 3 and just see how she does. And she flew through it. We got level 4, she flew through it, and now I don't even have her sit down with easy reader books with me anymore, because she just reads through them so easily, because her reading level went up so quickly from simply reading the Magic Tree House series, and now she can read other books. Like, she's read the Boxcar Children on her own, or not Best Friends, but the one that comes before it by Shannon Hale. She's read both of those on her own and really enjoyed them and comprehended them really well, and has really enjoyed reading, and now reading to her has already become part of her identity. So yeah, letting kids read fluff reads or serial series, it can be really beneficial to children to do that, especially as you give them license to choose the books that they want to read, and then that's another reason to continue reading aloud. You can choose books that you feel are higher quality, or introduce classics to them and talk with them, make sure they understand the vocabulary, so when they do decide that they want to, or if they ever do decide that they want to read classics, because it's okay if they don't, then they will have that context and that vocabulary, and you'll know that you are giving them some of the books that you really want them to read, while they also get to read for enjoyment on their own and grow that love of reading, so that as they grow older, they will love to read, and they'll choose books that have more substance to them as they get older. And sometimes they'll still read fluff reads, because fluff reads are really fun to read, and I love myself a good fluff read at least once a month. Another really, really good thing to do with kids besides reading aloud to them is to do silent reading with them. And I thought it was so interesting, because he talks about in the book how kids who do silent reading while the teacher, for example, is grading papers or something, they tend not to enjoy silent reading as much, or not as many kids actually read, where when the teacher or another adult who they look up to is present and reading, then the kids are much more likely to really get into the silent reading and enjoy it, because they get to see a role model doing it. And that's actually one of the reasons that it's really important for dads to read, because sons, they will see a lot of females reading. Their mother, their librarian, their teachers, most of those are female. And so they see a lot of those women reading, and in their minds they can actually associate reading as a feminine thing to do and not want to do it as much. But if they see their fathers reading, then they will be much more likely to pick up books and read themselves. Another thing to do is to not use reading as a punishment, and in fact you could actually use it strategically, like the opposite way. Like, a lot of parents will read to their kids or let their kids read before bed, because kids will do just about anything to put off going to bed. And so it can make it a very desirable activity to do. Or you can make it kind of like special. Like, I know Ashton feels really special that she is old enough to get to stay up a little later than her sisters and read. And so that's one way that we make reading kind of a special event and not a punishment. Another really interesting thing is to take the kids to the library. And in fact, it is the highest statistic, like the highest percentage of kids who go to the light of all the things that you can do, reading aloud and having books in the home and letting kids see you read and stuff, those all have really high percentages, in like the 70s and 80s of kids who do that end up enjoying reading as an adult. But with going to the library, it's like 96% or something like that. It's a crazy high number. So if you take your kids to the library and let them pick out their own books, then your kids are way likely to end up being readers as adults and enjoying it. And also just having books in your home. Children with the highest interest in reading have books not just in 1 or 2 places in their home, but spread out all over the place. In fact, he recommends that you have books in every room in the house, including the bathroom. We actually don't have books in the bathroom. We don't have books currently in the kitchen either. but we do have books in every other room, and we try and keep books really out and accessible for our kids to be able to get to them easily and have them so that they'll notice them, because the more that they notice them, the more likely they are to sit down and look at them. He also talks about the 3 B's. You buy books, even just letting a child have their own library of 5 books, or it doesn't have to be a large number of books that they own, but having them own their own books makes it more likely that they will enjoy reading and appreciate books and reading. And then the second B is a book basket, and that just has to do with spreading the books around your house. And then the third one is a bed lamp so that they can read before bed. I'm going to wrap up now because this is turning into a long video. You can tell this is something that I am really passionate about. I love the topic of reading to your kids and just reading aloud and helping them love to learn to read. But this book is full of so much more than what I have shared today. Those are kind of the biggest picture things, the things that I got that were most important out of it, but it has so much in it. It has information on the benefits of rereading, especially under the age of 4. He has a chapter kind of recapping the do's and don'ts of reading to your kids. He has a chapter for fathers. He has a chapter for kids who are hyperactive. He has a chapter talking about television and the opportunity cost that comes with television, and is letting your kids watch TV okay. It really has so much knowledge in it and is so well presented. And then at the very end, he also has all of his recommendations for different read alouds that you can do with your kids that are really good read alouds. And I've honestly loved this book every time I've reread it. You can tell I did buy it used, but I have read it and marked it and just absolutely loved using it to learn how to be a better parent as I am reading it to my kids. Because it uses a lot of examples and stories, I do think that this is a good one for pretty much any parent, but especially if you enjoy statistics and studies. If you want something less focused on that, you could try the Read Aloud Family by Sarah Mckenzie. She also has some other books that are really good on parenting, and she has a podcast called the Read Aloud Revival. So if you're into podcasts rather than wanting to sit down and read a book, then you could go and check that out. They have a lot of different reading lists for things like ages and holidays and diverse reads and things like that, so you can go check out that. I'll link it down in the description box. Another great book on reading that is less about reading itself and more about choosing really good books to read aloud to your family is called Honey for a Child's Heart. And I'll link all of these down below so you can go check them out if you are interested. I would love in the comments below, if you are a parent, to let me know one of your favorite memories reading aloud to your children, or just kind of your experience of reading aloud with them. And if you're not a parent, I would love to hear, did your parents read to you or do any of these things? And do you feel like it helped to nurture your love of reading? I would love to hear your experiences and talk more about this in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for lots of reading and writing content. And thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one.